our feeling body is much stronger than our thinking brain. So we can think smoking's bad for me, but if we feel and taste and smell that smoking is crappy, we get a negative prediction error. In our first randomized controlled trial, 5 times the quit rates of gold standard treatment for smoking cessation. 5 times the quit rates. And so we're seeing, oh, this isn't about willpower. This is about awareness.
Judson Brewer, MD, PhD, is an internationally renowned addiction psychiatrist and neuroscientist. He's a professor in the School of Public Health and Medical School at Brown University. In his 2016 TED Talk, A Simple Way to Break a Bad Habit, has been viewed nearly 20 million times. You know, your book is phenomenal. It's very timely, as your work tends to be, even if it's not necessarily planned. But, you know, right now, a lot of folks, especially during this time of year, they're wanting to change their habits. Mm-hmm. And if you could, let's start off by talking about willpower. All right, Let's talk about this approach. If we want to change our habits, and maybe we have a habit that is not necessarily serving us and we want to change it or break that habit, can we just focus on like grinding our teeth, white knuckle it, and just like get it done? Let's talk about willpower. Is that the way to get there?
Yeah, well, I think anybody that's tried knows the answer, which is, boy, I wish it worked. You know, I wish we could just put some willpower in this tea and drink it up.
Right. We could sell that.
Here's my willpower. Oh, yeah.
Shawn and Judd's willpower tea.
Yeah. The funny thing is that, boy, there's a relief on the Parthenon in Greece that highlights how long this willpower debate's been going on, right? So this, I don't know how old that is, but that's like hundreds, if thousands, I don't know how old that, long, very old, very old. And what they're suggesting, it's this horse and this rider, and the horse denotes the passions, and the rider is reason, is willpower, right? Who's stronger? You know, you got to learn how to ride that horse. So in modern day, you know, we chalk that up as like, well, just get some more willpower. What's wrong with you? You know, grit your teeth, do it. And unfortunately, from a neuroscience standpoint, that's not how the brain works. And so it's this story we tell ourselves. It's this heuristic that says, oh yeah, there's something wrong with you. You know, if it's dieting, you know, just make sure you don't, you know, you eat the salad instead of the cake. Just make sure you exercise every day. Make sure you do this. You know, you should. And the formula is right. You know, the calories in, calories out formula, same one I learned in medical school. It is still accurate, yet how you get there is not what we'd like to think, because it would be so simple if we could just say, train your willpower, just grit and do it. From a neuroscience standpoint, ready for this? Willpower is more myth than muscle. And what I mean by that is we can think that we've got some willpower or that we can learn willpower, but even if there is such a thing as willpower, let's give it that, let's give it that. It seems to be seated in the prefrontal cortex. This dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is a part of the cognitive control part of the brain. Now, that is the youngest and the weakest part of the brain from an evolutionary perspective. So guess what happens to the prefrontal cortex when we get hungry, when we get angry, when we get stressed out, when we're tired? It goes offline. It runs for the hills. And it says, hey, habit brain, take it from here. I can't handle this. So from a marketing perspective, if there's a diet plan, it's brilliant because they can say, hey, just follow our formula and you'll win. And, oh, you can't follow the formula? There's something wrong with you, not our formula. So sign up for another year.
So for this conversation, we're going to move forward with willpower. We're going to call it willpower Sasquatch. All right?
Okay, I love it.
It's a myth. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not. But let's talk about what is real.
Okay.
All right. So before we get into how to change a habit, it's so important, and I encourage this with everything in our lives. Like, let's address the what. Like, what is it? Mm-hmm. What are we actually dealing with here? We often try to change things that we don't even know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So what is a habit? How are our habits formed in the first place?
Well, habits were, this goes all the way back, actually, evolutionarily conserved back to the sea slug. So the first organism that has an organized nervous system that can be studied, that the nerves are big enough to be studied. And in fact, Eric Kandel got the Nobel Prize back in 2000 showing that humans form memories basically the same way as sea slugs. And the way that works is 3 elements. You need a trigger or a cue. a behavior and then a result, or from a neuroscience standpoint, a reward. So think back to our ancient ancestors they didn't have refrigerators or food delivery. They had to remember where food is. So they're out on the savannah or in the woods foraging. They find a food source. And so there's the trigger. They see the food. They eat the food. There's the behavior. And then their stomach sends this dopamine signal to their brain that says, remember what you ate and where you found it. So it's actually set up to help us remember things like, oh, the food is here. So when I go back, when I go back to the cave, I can remember where to come and get it tomorrow. The same is true. So that's called positive reinforcement, because you remember, something's rewarding and you go back to do it again. The flip side or the negatively valent side of that is called negative reinforcement. And that's where we learn through fear conditioning. So basically, if you're out foraging, you see the saber-toothed tiger, you see, oh, there's danger, and you run. There's the behavior, and then you survive. You don't become their lunch. There's the reward, and you learn that's a dangerous part of the savannah. Don't go back there. And so positive and negative reinforcement work the same way. It's basically, something triggers a behavior, and that behavior results in something rewarding to our brain. Does that make sense?
Of course. And it's kind of scary in a sense, because this is happening automatically. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, wires can get crossed as far as we can have something where we experience a reward that eventually, maybe even very quickly, hurts us.
Yeah.
And these are some of the habits that we often want to change. And I love this. This is the first book that I've come across where your language is more congruent with mine, where I don't want to label something as good or bad because of we have so much data on that language, right? And so with a cheat meal, for example, right? With the cheat meal, people might have a good intention about it, but the way that their mind is wired up, we don't associate very many positive things with cheating, right? Whether it's in a test context or relationship or, sports, whatever the case is, we often see that as a bad thing. And now I'm cheating, like, am I a bad person? Or, I'm eating a quote bad food.
Yeah.
And we put so much into that. So you said helpful habits or not so helpful, or reframing these things. Why did you do that?
Well, language really affects our lives. And so the words that we use matter because they put language to our experience and then affect our experience. And so if we are in, this is also a habit of humans, we're in the habit of judging. That's good, that's bad. So we're already adding a layer of complexity that we don't actually need to add to it. And when something's judged as good or bad, then we're already adding complexity where we're thinking, oh, this is, I want to do more of this. I don't want, and it actually gets in the way of the learning process. So I think of this more as, hey, what's helpful from a health standpoint? What's unhelpful from a health standpoint? And ideally, we try to place judgment off to the side. It's not easy to do, but if we can, then we can bring in a mode of curiosity and kindness. We can get to this more later because I think of these as superpowers. But when we can be curious about what's actually happening, we can see the data more clearly, and it helps us learn more quickly.
Now, what are your preferred terms for people to maybe start to borrow instead of a good or bad habit?
Yeah, I think helpful, unhelpful is probably one of the better ones that I've come across. But I think people should find their own language that works and really think of it this way. It's like, what's moving me toward optimal health and what's moving me away from optimal health, instead of good, optimal good, so we can think of what's moving me toward, what's moving me away. It's kind of like, are we aligning our path so that we're moving in the right direction?
This is a game changer for me already, just sitting here talking to you. You're adding complexity with your labeling. How you label things, you're adding complexity.
Yes.
And that complexity can be the very thing that you get caught up in, in that net. Now, with this being said, and I know this is a big question, but the dieting industry, dieting itself has been happening, in particular, we'll just say the last 50 years,
sure,
where the diet industry has been like this really booming thing. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, we keep gaining more and more and more weight with all of these options and these different diets. Can you talk a little bit about why diets aren't working for people?
Well, they were, if you look at it from a neuroscience standpoint, if you look at one of the first true dieting industry behemoths, Weight Watchers, founded back in 1963. So that, 50, 60 years, that was around before the field of neuroscience was even founded. It was more biology and things like that. And so neuroscience came along later and then started questioning this dominant paradigm of, hey, what is it? Is willpower really a thing? And so why doesn't it work? Well, it was never, it's a good story, but it doesn't mean that the story is true. So if you really look at how behavior changes, it has nothing to do with willpower. There's actually an equation that these two researchers came up with in the 1970s, Rescorla and Wagner, that is still in use today because it is still true. Like it's over and over, it gets proven. And what they found was that basically, your current reward value of something is based on how rewarding it was in the past plus an error term. So wait a minute, there's no willpower in that equation. There's no history, like the closest that history comes in there is what set up the reward value of something. So I think of it as when we set up how rewarding a behavior is, that habit, I think of it as set and forget. So you set a reward value, and often with food, like let's say cake, right? We go to all these birthday parties as kids, and we start to associate cake with ice cream and presents and fun and, laughter and all that stuff. That's that composite reward value that all gets laid down where our brain says, oh, see cake? Oh, cake is a good thing. And when we were 5, we could eat cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We'd probably be all right. Can't quite do that in adulthood so much. We start to see the sugar rush and the crash. And so here, our brain is just set up on this set and forget habit loop where it says see cake, eat cake. And so we can then try to bring in this willpower and say, well, stop doing that. There's a great skit from the 1970s also. 70s, a lot of good stuff came out of the 70s. And so there's this guy, Bob Newhart, who had a skit. He was, plays the psychologist on his show. And this woman comes in trying to change, she has this fear that she talks about. And basically he just says, okay, ready? She's like, okay. Should I take notes? He says, you don't need notes. And he goes, stop it. And she's like, what? He says, well, stop it. Stop doing that. And I don't want to ruin the skit because it is worth watching.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly. 5 minutes that is pure. Well, 1, it's genius the way he wrote it. But 2, he's highlighting back in the 70s, this willpower myth. Yet everybody's like, well, no, whatever. It's a skit. It's funny. But it's true. And that goes back to this research that suggests that, hey, the only way to change a habit is to update the reward value of the behavior in our brain. Okay, that's the key. That's what that error term says. And to get into it, you can, so let's use cake as an example. So let's say that I have a certain reward value of cake in my head. And there's a new bakery that opens up in my neighborhood. So I go to the bakery and I see some cake and I eat it. And I'm like, wow, this is the best cake I've ever had. I'm like drooling all over myself. And so I get what's called a positive prediction error, where my brain expected it to be so good because there's a bar that my brain has set. It beat the best, right? And so it's positive prediction error. I get this dopamine spritz in my brain that says, hey, remember this place. They make good cake, right? So I've learned something. I've learned that they make good cake. On the other hand, if I eat the cake and I'm like, I've had better, I get the negative prediction error. I also learned something, dopamine spritz in my brain that says, hey, forget about this place. They got to work on their cake, So I also learned, hey, not so good. But notice how both of those require one thing, which is awareness. I have to pay attention. So this is something that we zoomed in on was, hey, so it seems to be awareness that changes habits, not willpower. So we double clicked on that, and we actually, my first clinical trial, way before I started working with eating, we did a study with smoking cessation, right? And so a lot of my patients come in, they've tried everything to quit smoking, they can't do it, medications, willpower, everything. So hey doc, help me quit smoking. I'm like, okay, go home and smoke. And they look at me like I'm crazy. My doctor just told me to smoke. Doesn't he know that smoking's bad for me? Because they all know this, right? I know this too. But I say, pay attention as you smoke. And they come back and they're blown away. They're like, how did I not notice this? These things taste like crap. I'm like, yeah, cigarettes don't taste very good. That's why they put menthol in them. That's why they make vapes taste like mango, because nicotine is a toxin that your body is saying, dude, don't put this in me. And so when we pay attention, our body can tell us all that we need to know, which is, why are you smoking? Not you shouldn't smoke because it's bad for you, right? That's up in our head. It's our body. Our body is so much stronger. I think of it as our feeling body is much stronger than our thinking brain, right? So we can think smoking's bad for me, but if we feel and taste and smell that smoking is crappy, we get a negative prediction error. Ready for this? In our first randomized controlled trial, 5 times the quit rates of gold standard treatment for smoking cessation. 5 times the quit rate.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So awareness can do a mic drop here, because it's like, look, dude, no willpower needed. All you have to do is pay attention. And so it's funny, in our smoking program, this was working pretty well. So we developed this app called Craving to Quit, and we were pilot testing it. And somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm changing my eating habits using your program for smoking. And I was thinking, okay, typically people will substitute eating for smoking. And so I made this assumption that they were just eating. Most people gain about 15 pounds when they quit smoking. And they said, no, I'm actually cutting down on my snacking. And I said, what? Can you say that again? Yeah, I'm cutting down on my snacking. Oh, wait a minute. We can actually use these same awareness practices to help people with eating. Because I'm an addiction psychiatrist. I was focusing on smoking because I was really struggling helping my patients there. So I was like, wait a minute, we could actually use this for eating. It's the same mechanism, yet eating is harder than smoking. You don't need to smoke to survive, but you do need to eat. So there we got really interested in exploring, okay, how far can we take this? And we even we developed this app called Eat Right Now, where we could actually embed these awareness practices and have people pay attention as they overeat. Another study, we published this a couple of years ago, where we had people pay attention. We gave them this tool, this craving tool, and we had them pay attention as they overate. Are you ready for this? It only took 10 to 15 times of them paying attention as they overate for that reward value to go below 0, and they shift their behavior. And so we're seeing, this isn't about willpower. This is about awareness. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. Now, herein lies the challenge about that. Like you said, so many people were doing this behavior and they didn't realize that they had access to that thing that's always there. They weren't paying attention to paying attention.
I love that. Yeah.
Right? And so awareness, obviously, like you're saying, this is paramount in our lives, to be able to pay attention. Mm-hmm. There's so many, I think an added layer of challenge here is that there's so many things that's pulling our awareness away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It is an attention economy for sure.
Yeah. And so with this being said, to note the fact that awareness is really the key for habit change, how do you actually do it? All right. And you lay this out, of course, in the book, but I want to give folks an understanding of how this works, because as you shared, you kind of stumbled on this as a side effect, helping people to stop smoking. It's just like, this translates. This is for everything.
Yeah.
And it's really a game changer.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So here, the key first piece of this is to leverage that reward value equation. And so that negative reinforcement through the negative prediction error is really important. So people have to see very clearly that overeating is not rewarding, because they can tell themselves that they shouldn't overeat, or they can feel for themselves what overeating feels like. So that's the first piece. And when people start to notice it, they suddenly get interested and they're like, oh, I never noticed that before. So it naturally starts to awaken our curiosity. And here, I think of curiosity as this superpower, because curiosity has several characteristics that are really interesting. One is that it's intrinsically rewarding. So curiosity itself feels good. Mm-hmm. We don't have to go buy curiosity at the store. It's something that we have. You don't have to put it in your green tea. Curiosity.
Nailed it. That's it. That's it. That's our name of our tea.
Not intentional, but you get the idea, right? Yeah. It's something that it's intrinsic. We don't have to drink it. And we can, so one, it's there. It's for us to awaken ourselves. Two, when you compare curiosity, now I'm stuck on that. When you compare curiosity to a craving, for example, like a craving to eat, another bite of cake or something like that, which one feels better? Like cravings, they feel contracted, they're itchy, they're urgy, they're set up to drive us to do things. That's what cravings are for. They're survival mechanisms that say, go get food, or go get your cigarette, or go get whatever, go check your social media. So here, that itchy urge doesn't feel as good as just being curious about the physical sensations themselves. And I started to learn this with my patients, where I started exploring with them, just like, what does a craving feel like? I remember one of my patients who had actually come in, he said, Doc, if I don't smoke, my head's going to explode. And, like, okay, chief complaint, head exploding. Haven't had that one before. Let's roll with it. So I started asking him, I was working at the VA hospital, so this is one of the veterans, and I said, what's head exploding feel like? And he started describing the physical sensations, like, tightness, tension, burning, all this stuff. And I went to my whiteboard and started drawing the intensity. I was like, is it getting stronger, stronger? He's like, yeah. And then it peaked and it started to go down. And his eyes got really wide. And I said, what did you just notice? He said, well, I usually smoke before it goes away. And I just realized that cravings will go away if I don't do anything. And so this was this big eye-opener for him, this realization that cravings, one, are physical sensations. They come and go on their own, and all you have to do is be curious and be with them. And so the more we can start to really just explore, what does a craving feel like? That can help us shift out of the, oh no, here's a craving, I have to fight with it. And here's that willpower thing again, that willpower myth, the Sasquatch.
The Sasquatch willpower. Oh, that's so good, man. All right. You broke this down into 3 parts in the book. And so, you have all the setup science as well laid out in the first section of the book, but then you go into part 1, part 2, part 3, and really just kind of break down. We just led into it a little bit, but mapping your habit loops.
Yeah.
All right. So the mapping part. So is that the awareness and paying attention?
Well, awareness is critical for all 3 parts, but let's start with the first part. So if we can't, if you can't see what it is, if you can't map it, you can't work with it. So habits, you've got to bring them into the light. And so we bring these habits into the light through awareness, through curiosity, like, what's this habit? So for example, we can start with our eating behavior. And first off, I want to give a shout out to the stories that I talk about in my book. So my patients and the people in our Eat Right Now program were just so generous with sharing their stories with me that I could share those stories with other people to help them so they could see, like, this is what it's like in real life. And their stories ranged from like stress eating to just mindless eating to overeating to binge eating, into being addicted to fast food. One of the people in the book really talked about how that was his drug. And so I just want to give a shout out to them for being so kind and generous with their stories. And with that, I highlight in the book how the first step for any of us is to map out what the habit loop around eating is, because there can be multiple ones. There can be one that's dominant. There can be ones that show up at certain times of day or under certain circumstances, but they all share the same structure, that trigger, the behavior, and the result. And the nice thing here is the trigger's not important. People might think, what? Trigger? Because most of my patients come in, they're like, well, if I could just avoid or tackle or, fight with my triggers, then I could win. Well, triggers only set the process going. They're not what drive the process. So I say, forget about the triggers, right? If you can recognize them, if you can name them, great, but don't worry about it. Focus on the behavior. So is it mindless eating? Is it overeating? Is it stress eating? Is it boredom eating? Is it sad eating? Is it happy eating? You get the idea.
It's a lot of kind of eating.
Yeah. Well, all of these things get associated with eating, but in the absence of actual hunger, right? So these are the hunger habits where we think we're hungry, but we're not actually needing food. I think of the differentiation here is between homeostatic hunger, which is the actual need for food, and hedonic hunger, which is all the emotional eating.
Yeah.
So they've got to map that piece out. Like, why am I going to food, right? What is driving that? Is it boredom? Is it stress? Is it, sadness, whatever? So seeing what that is and how they're eating. So I think of it as the why, what, and how. Like, why are they reaching for food? What are they reaching for? Is it comfort food? There's a reason it's called comfort food. And then how am I eating it? Are they just pounding it? Are they just mindlessly eating it? Or are they really paying attention? And all of those are important. But that first step is just mapping out that loop. So trigger, behavior, result. And if they can't notice the trigger, just the behavior and the result. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's profound in of itself. Just paying attention to the reason that we're eating. Mm-hmm. We usually don't do that, and this could be, like you said, so many different reasons, especially in the fitness space. This could be you're eating because you have to, it's a time thing. It's a math equation that you're doing this on. This could be entertainment is a big thing, just like a taste for something or something interesting. This could be, as you mentioned, comfort food. We could be depressed and looking for that little hit of serotonin from some carbs, but we don't think about it. And so it's just happening. Like we're not really paying attention to our reality, our lives. And we're not thinking about our thinking.
Right.
And so even this, if people get this is going to change your life completely. Just being able to pay attention to why you're doing some of the things you're doing.
Yeah.
Be in your body, in your space, in your brain, in your own mind, and paying attention. It's kind of freaky. It's like some Neo stuff when you start to pay attention. Like, what, it's like
red pill, blue pill. Yeah. That awareness is critical. And the beauty of it is that I can, as I'm taking a history with, an intake with one of my patients, that's what I'm listening for, right? So certainly their story is important, and we can zoom in on, okay, here's some of these habits that I'm hearing. Am I getting this right? So first, I can help them see that I'm actually listening, which is already, helpful, because in medical space is a mess right now.
Yeah.
So it's I really do care, because I do. I love working with my patients. So one, I'm listening, and I'm reflecting it back to make sure I'm getting the story right, which is also helpful. And I'm helping them start to make these connections. So, can they see what's the trigger, what's the behavior, what's the result? And then I'm like, hey, can you see that this is a habit loop? And then I explain it very briefly, like we just talked about. It's like, hey, if it's pleasant, you're going to want more of it. If it's unpleasant, you're going to want less of it. That's pretty straightforward. Your brain's set up that way.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, wow, I never realized that that's where, eating popcorn while I'm watching a movie, and when I don't have the popcorn, I feel like there's something off, because that's just what they're used to, right? Seeing those habits illuminates them so that they can now, see how their mind works. So you got to see how your mind works before you can work with your mind. And that's where steps 2 and 3 come in, is working with your mind.
Yes. So good. So good. So we've got the mapping part we've just introduced, and obviously you go into much richer detail in the book. Part 2 is changing the reward value of these eating behaviors in our brains.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So we touched on that a little bit earlier, but this is really where this Rescorla-Wagner equation comes in, and also critically depends on awareness. So basically, if we know this is how our brain works, that our brain's not going to change a habit until it sees that it is actually better than expected or worse than expected, right? So let's start with the worse than expected. I have people pay attention as they overeat, and as I mentioned that study, relatively quickly, people start to realize overeating does not feel good, right? The holidays, when somebody overindulges in a holiday, their stomach says, dude, why did you do that again? Right? They're like, well, I wasn't paying attention. This is the food looks good, or we're in good conversation, or my family's a mess. And so I eat to numb myself, and that numbing is actually not that rewarding. So they pay attention as they overeat, and their body tells them everything they need to know, which is, hey, overeating, not so great. So they start to become disenchanted with that behavior, and we can distill that down to one question, which is, what am I getting from this, right? Not a thinking, I shouldn't overeat, but a feeling, what does it feel like to overeat? That's critical. It's the feeling body. That's what drives all of behavior change.
All right, the feeling body versus the pain body. Eckhart Tolle is coming up, the pain body. So it's being able to pay attention through all of these processes, obviously, but this is where we pay attention to, as you mentioned, the negative prediction error, right?
Yep.
And seeing, are things matching up with our prediction, right? So is this happening in this portion?
Exactly. Yep,
Okay.
that's it.
Now, moving on, in this part of the equation, I think we miss out on a lot. And so part of the reason I think that I've been able to help a lot of people is because I understand some basic tenets about humans just from observation.
Yeah.
Again, like, we love freedom. We love to be able to choose. We don't like being told what to do.
Right.
And we really enjoy food. We've got this really immaculate flavor palette, right? And you hear Gary Vee talk about wine, for example, like there's hints of like a rusty nickel and like recently shitted on dirt. You know, it's just like all the, how do you taste that? First of all, how do you know what that
rusty
tastes?
nickels? And do nickels even rust?
That's the thing. And so, you know, it's just like we have this incredible palate, but a big part of that is our nose, you know, our ability to smell.
Yeah.
And people would know, for example, if you're not feeling well, you have a, you know, sinus blockage or whatever, your food doesn't taste right.
Right.
And part of this helped us to make healthy food choices, safety of food, being able to tell certain things. Also, sound is big too. I recently talked about the sonic chip experiment. And this actually won a Nobel Prize. Is the Ig Nobel Prize, which is like, you know, science that makes you laugh but then makes you think. But all of these things combine for a certain experience when we eat food. The sound, the smell, the taste. And that is something that our ancestors, we're talking hundreds of thousands of years in this kind of current model of this interaction with food. And then to suddenly villainize it, like, if it tastes good, spit it out, right? I've got colleagues, you know, it's been one of those things. You're ignoring how we're wired up in our biology. We have been seeking out tasty things forever. All species, they go after things that are attractive to them for whatever reason. And so knowing that this is the case, let's lean into the fact that we love and enjoy food and pay more attention to certain aspects of it, right? This could be the quality, this could be the surrounding experience. Let's proactively, intelligently put in place a reward that has to be equal to or better than that other thing.
Yeah.
And that's the part is so crazy at this point. I love talking to you about this. It's like, it's so often left out. It's just like, again, use your willpower.
Right.
If it tastes good, spit it out. All these different things, you have to replace that. You have to add in the reward intentionally to get the real sustainable change.
So here's the crazy thing. The reward is already there. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
let's frame this a little bit. How many people can think back to the last time they ate their favorite treat, ice cream, cake, chocolate, whatever, and think back to, you've got the ice cream in your mouth and you're already thinking about that next bite or that next lick of ice cream or that next bite of cake. You're not actually enjoying what's in your mouth. So you are wasting food. If it's, you know, like there's food for calories, but like if you're enjoying a really good dessert,
You're missing out on all the pleasure that's
the
there.
whole point is that it's a really good dessert. So don't spit it out. Actually pay attention as you eat it. And I think I write about this in the book. I call it the pleasure plateau. And my friend Dana Small, who's a food scientist at Yale, she actually did this for a PhD thesis where she fed people basically their favorite chocolate while she was measuring their brain activity. And at the beginning, people were like, this is awesome. You know, I love chocolate. And then she would just keep feeding them and feeding them and feeding them. And what she found, and I think the record was 74 squares of chocolate before somebody's like, Uncle, get me out of here. What did I sign up for? But all of them go from, this is amazing, I want more, to this is awful. Eating another piece would make me feel sick. And what that highlights is, I think of this as the pleasure plateau, which is a little bit tastes good if we really pay attention. And with each bite, our body's going to say at some point, okay, that's enough. And if we don't pay attention, we're going to hit that pleasure plateau and we're just going to go right off the cliff of overindulgence. And so if we pay attention with each bite, one, we're enjoying the food. That's what it's for. Mm-hmm. Two, we can see it, we can sense and feel and taste and smell where our body's saying, okay, that's good. That's good. Save the rest for later, right? And we can save the rest for later. If it's really good, why not enjoy it twice as compared to like not paying attention and just like shoveling it down and craving that next bite? So it changes the experience completely because we're, one, really enjoying the food, and two, we're naturally stopping without willpower, without anything except awareness. Our body is so amazing in that way. It's got everything. All we have to do is tap into its strength, its power, its wisdom.
Yeah. And this is part 3, is looking at the reward part of this. Mm-hmm. Now I've got a question for you. And again, we talked about how our awareness is fractured today in a way because of all this stuff, this external stuff, vying for our attention. We also live at a time where food isn't the same food, right? We've got food scientists, brilliant food scientists, who are manufacturing things that are manipulating those pathways, things like bliss point or vanishing caloric density. So it can distract our brains essentially, because through evolution, if there was one flavor, like you said, and we're taking that thing over and over again, that particular flavor, our brain's going to be like, enough.
Yep.
But what if there's just the right amount of this and a little bit of that? Then, it becomes more difficult when we're talking about some of these ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
Now, what about that terrain?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to guess that you don't have a Doritos or a Cheetos tree in your backyard, right? Because there's no such thing. And I love my favorite peer-reviewed journal, The Onion. Right? They had a headline that says Doritos celebrates its 1 millionth ingredient, right? Because they are dialing it in every day, right? And there's a reason that those both are like electric orange. And the Cheetos is a great example of vanishing caloric density, where it's like, well, did you just eat something? No, better try it again.
Yep.
Try it again. So those are designed for addiction. Michael Moss wrote brilliantly about this, where, all these things that they engineer, from feeling like we're in control with Lunchables, like kids feeling like they're in control of what they're eating, to all of these, bliss point manipulations to get people just addicted to things. The funny thing there is addiction is not pleasant. And so when we're just mindlessly consuming or feeling like we are under the spell of whatever the chip or the ultra processed food is, that's not actually very pleasant when you pay attention, because you feel like there's this drive that you have no control over, right? Addiction is continued use despite adverse consequences. That's what I learned in residency. Continued use despite adverse consequences. Well, if you look at food and somebody eating an entire bag, continued use despite adverse consequences when they feel like they can't stop, right? So they're designed for addiction. If we pay attention, we can start to see pretty clearly that they're actually not very rewarding. And so we hit that second step where we become disenchanted when we see, oh, addiction doesn't feel very good. None of my patients with addiction say, this is great. Help me be more addicted, doc. They come to me for the opposite. So the third step, I think of this as finding the BBO, the bigger, better offer.
Not to be mistaken with the BBL.
Yes, not to be mistaken with the BBL. So the BBO, this actually came from my high school days. It's like you set up a date and, you're all looking forward to it on Friday. And then suddenly your date's like, oh, I'm washing my hair or whatever, lame excuse. It's like, oh, they found somebody else asked them out and they're bigger, better offer than I am. So like, I'm relegated to watching television while they go out with the other person. So the bigger, better offer, our brain is set up this way where it's going to have preferences. It's going to say A or B. If B is better, I'm picking B, right? So if we can start to see that our old habits are not that great, that's what that second step is about, becoming disenchanted, we can then give our brain something better. And the nice thing about better is that it's already there. It might simply be paying attention as we eat and stopping before we're overstuffed. Because what feels better, stopping before you're overstuffed or being overstuffed? Duh, right? It's a no-brainer to our brain. So bringing that awareness in, again, awareness is critical for this third step as well. Just seeing like, oh, how much is enough? How much is enough? That in itself can be more rewarding, that bigger, better offer. Another way to help actually with all of these steps, I think of this curiosity as this bigger, better offer because it feels better. It feels better than the craving. So if we have a craving for something and we're doing, let's say I think of it as rest and digest. Like if we're going like 14 hours between eating dinner and breakfast or something like that, like the time restricted eating. At first, when somebody's starting to get used to that, they can have craving. If they snack a lot at night, they might have a craving for a snack, even though they're not hungry. And so getting curious about that craving helps them work with and ride that craving out instead of trying to fight with it or like try to distract themselves or whatever. So they can disarm that craving. They can see that craving doesn't have any power if you bring in that the curiosity, because you get curious about it and suddenly, oh, it's just these sensations. It's not that big of a deal. And so curiosity itself is tremendously powerful.
And we have so much of it.
Yeah, we do.
We're a curious species, Now, this is another great tie-in here is our curiosity is why social media, right? Again, we've got brilliant engineers and scientists leveraging our curiosity. We're looking for that next thing. What I would advocate for us to do for the most incredible scrolling you'll ever experience is to use that curiosity within.
Yes.
Because that show is off the charts. You know what I'm saying? We have some of the craziest thoughts and like brilliant thoughts and creativity and beauty and, mucky nastiness. There's so much going on internally. If you can direct some of that inward. And, this is something, as you mentioned, our ancestors figured out a lot of this stuff and kind of advocating for certain things. Know thyself. And truly today, it is rare to come across a person who really knows themselves. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of our thoughts even, they're regurgitated. We're just pulling in things from the environment and just, we're not really in contemplation and thinking. But to have this resource right now, especially when, again, there's a lot of things vying for our attention, mm-hmm. we know in our hearts and in our core, we desire to be better. Mm-hmm. We want to feel good and we want to enjoy this life. And with that said, it is a complicated terrain. And what you're doing is you're giving us a roadmap to understand what's happening in our bodies, in our minds, in our brain. And it is incredible. Like, it is such a gift. And you've put this together for us. It's a great resource. I love the cover of the book. Of course, I got an early copy. And, there's actually some kind of hidden messages here on the cover that people might see or notice. But even if you don't consciously notice, your mind is picking this information up, and you're really addressing a need. And this, even though this is the hunger habit, which is the name of the new book, this can address so many areas of our lives. Mm-hmm. And so that's the cool thing about your work, is that it translates over. And so right now, folks, depending on when you're listening to this, you can pre-order the book or go and get the book right now at bookstores, again, depending on when you're picking this up. If you pre-order the book, you've got a cool bonus with that app that you mentioned. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, the Eat Right Now app is where it's great forum and a medium for us to actually do research, where we can do studies and see how these reward values change and how quickly they change and all of that. So the Eat Right Now app and it's actually one of the first, maybe the first alternate curriculum that's recognized by the CDC, where it focuses primarily on this awareness, on mindfulness, whereas the previous ones that are largely based on the 30 years of CDC, largely willpower based approaches. Sorry to say, but this app this Eat Right Now app is really helpful. And in our first study, actually, this was led by Ashley Mason at UCSF, where she found a 40% reduction in craving related eating when people started using the program. And the idea here, and all the concepts are laid out even more thoroughly in the book. But the idea here is awareness is so powerful for change. And we can put down the self-judgment that comes with feeling like we've got willpower failure. It's not our fault. This is something that if we learn how our brain works, we can learn how to work with our brain, and we can be kind to ourselves in the process, which is also key. I see so many people beating themselves up, judging themselves, feeling like there's something wrong with them. Yeah. You know, in my Unwinding Anxiety book, we talk about how anxiety is something that people experience, but with eating, people feel like there's something that is wrong with them if they're not eating properly, like it's more under their control than anxiety is. But it turns out both are driven through the same habit mechanism.
It's amazing, amazing. Can you let everybody know where they can pick up a copy of the book?
Sure. The easiest place is just to go to my website, drjud.com, drjud.com, and they can find links to the book and places to buy it.
Awesome. And again, that bonus is there with the app. This app is 40%.
40% reduction in craving-related eating.
Yes.
Yeah, so the app, the Eat Right Now app, is where we found this 40% reduction in craving-related eating. And then we published papers after that showing this reward value drop when we added this craving tool in. So people that pre-ordered the book can actually get an early copy of the craving tool where they get to start working with it. And also, I think they get a free month of the Eat Right Now app.
So this is a truly science-backed app. This wasn't made by Vinny down at the app store, you know.
In his garage. You want an app? No, I'm a scientist. I'm a physician. I took a Hippocratic oath to first do no harm. And as a scientist, I would want to make sure that whatever I'm doing is actually working. And if it's not working, I'd want to learn why so I could make it work. So, you know, everything we do is not just science-backed, but it's actually based on the science that my lab at Brown University has actually performed.
Awesome. Can you share that URL one more time?
Sure, it's drjud.com, drjud.com.
drjud.com. Listen, this book is fantastic, and, you know, it's very easy to read as well. I love the opening of the book, and also the fact that, you know, we went to school in the same city.
Yeah,
you know,
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Shout out to everybody in St. Louis. And you're just doing amazing work right now, and we're going to put links to everything in the show notes. And I just appreciate you, man. This was really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your brilliance with all of us.
That was my pleasure.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
You know, why can't people get enough of food, stuff, status, all these things, right? Everyone knows that everything's fine in moderation, and yet we all suck at moderating. So why is that?